Thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. I'm here today to do a tabletop discussion comparing the original Israeli military Galil to this IWI Galil ACE. This one happens to be in 308, and that Galil that you see there on the table is at 5.56, although the Galil on the table is actually a Century Arms parts kit build that they called the Golani. That said, Century Arms is like gambling. You get some good ones and you get some bad ones, and that one on the table happens to be one of the good ones. In fact, I performed admirably with it at the very first Desert Brutality and won my division with it. I really love that Golani build, and it is really representative of the Galil. It just happens to be a parts kit build by Century Arms. So in terms of that, we have an equal representation between the two guns. So what I want to talk about today is do a field strip of both of these and show you the differences and the lineage that turned into the Galil ACE. The truth is, this is very much a Galil, and the improvements they've made are actually quite beneficial. So let's take a look. Okay, so here we have the original Galil. Now this is a Golani by Century Arms, but it is in every way a Galil. It does have adjustable sights, and there are similarities and differences between the two. The Galil ACE is absolutely part of the family lineage of the original Galil. Let's go through the Galil, and we'll talk about what the differences are and what the benefits and upgrades are from the original Galil to the ACE. But first, let's just go talk about how the Galil actually functioned and worked. So the Galil is a AK derivative. It is very much like the Finnish RK series of guns, and they tried to do a number of improvements. One, they provided aperture sights, so there's a front post and a rear aperture, very much like the A1 or M16A1 series of rifles. They upturned the charging handle on the right side of the gun from a traditional AK. I actually find this to be worse than a regular AK. This is quite not ergonomic. You reach over the top or from the side, it's harder to get to this charging handle. I do not think that it's a very good idea. They did increase the size of the paddle that retains the magazine, so you can actually hit it with your index finger, and while under duress you can actually drop these mags relatively free, which is something you can't do in a traditional AK. They did retain the standard locking system of the AK magazine, which is rock and lock. That's not different at all. They do have a folding stock. It folds to the side and you can fire the gun with it folded. It does not have an adjustable length of pull. They also improve the safety. Traditional AK safety on the right, like this, but also there is a thumb safety on the other side, which by pulling to the rear will disengage the safety. Now, a lot of people are confused about this. The original Israeli military guns were SAR, safe, automatic in the middle, and semi-automatic to the rear. So to disengage the safety on an original Galil, you actually pulled to the rear if it was a select fire Galil. That is the majority of Galils that were used by the military. S for safe, A for automatic, and R for repeat or semi-automatic. This is a semi-automatic only, so you pull it to the rear. It isn't that bad. You can actually just kind of hit it with your thumb to pull it to the rear, but it's a little strange pulling to the rear to go off safe versus pushing forward. The top cover is extremely tightly seated to the gun, and the reason for that is the rear aperture is actually mounted to the top cover, and therefore this needs to seat tightly, otherwise you'll have a problem with zeroing. Zeroing on the original Galil is all done with the front sight. The front post is either raised or lowered for elevation, and there's a screw on both sides of the sight of the front sight to adjust for windage. There is no quick windage or elevation adjustment in the field. But the rear sight does have a flip up, so you have your close range and long range sight. Again, much like a standard M16A1. And the original Galil does have night sights that flip up, front and rear, which are tritium inserts. They're only for close range. These, of course, are dead because they're way too old for them to be functional, but they did flip up and have night sights. The Galil ACE retained all of that functionality and made it only better. The front post does have a tritium insert, and the elevation is adjusted on the front and windage on the rear with a screw. The rear sight does have a flip, just like on the original Galil, back and forth for close and long range. When you adjust the front sight, you actually can make sure that the tritium insert for the night sight in the front sight is facing forward, which is a good design, and the rear close range sight has a tritium insert as well for night shooting. They have moved the charging handle from the right side to the left side of the Galil ACE, which is a significant ergonomic improvement in my opinion, especially if you're a right-handed shooter. The safety is still retained, however, on the semi-automatic Galil ACE, you can still use it AK style by pulling down, but for your thumb, it is actually push forward to go off safe, pull back to go on safe. It's also a little bit easier to engage and disengage than the original Galil. They have removed the rock and lock AK style magazine and gone with an SR25 style magazine, ambidextrous mag release, and it is drop free. This happens to be a Magpul mag, but any SR25 pattern will work. They did retain the folding stock, but also added adjustable length of pull, which is a good and neat feature to add. Because the charging handle was moved to the left side, they did open up part of the action for another path of ingress of dirt and debris, and they've added this spring-loaded dust cover on the left side to mitigate that. This actually works very well. In our mud test, we proved that it did. However, both the Galil ACE and the Galil still have a gigantic opening for the ejection port, which allows dirt and debris to get in, and once that gets into the locking lugs of the bolt or into the locking recesses, your gun is down for the count. Let's go ahead and field strip both of these guns, and I'll show you how similar they truly are. So first, of course, we remove the feeding device, take it off safe, and open the action and verify that it is empty, which it is. On the original Galil, you just push this in, and with a little bit of effort, that cover will come off. As I said, it's a very tight fit. But once it comes off, you then remove the recoil spring, just like any other AK, and then pull the bolt carrier group up and out, remove the 2-lug rotating bolt out of it, and your gas tube also comes out. And you can get into the action to clean your fire control group or anything in there, and you can also, of course, clean your bolt carrier, and all the other parts. To return it back to functional order, you put the bolt back into the bolt carrier, set that to the side, reinstall your gas tube, which does have splines on it to line it up. Align your piston to the gas tube, seat this into the lower receiver, push forward. Then you insert your recoil spring assembly, and I would advise you to seat it deep, actually, not into the recesses. I'm going to show you why in a minute. Because it's very hard to seat this top cover, you got to get that in there. And once you get it down hard enough, once it's on there, you can then vigorously run the action, and the recoil spring will snap right back into this, holding this in place. That's the easiest way to do this. Put it on safe, set it to the side. Now, the Galil ACE is the same, but harder, quite honestly. So first of all, of course, we're going to go off safe, and we're going to verify that we're empty, which we are. Okay, now we have to push this spring in. I have found this to be quite difficult, and I use a tool to do it. Push it in, and then recess it underneath the actual dust cover. Now, I got it. This is getting a little easier with use, but it's quite difficult sometimes. Once you've done that, you then remove the recoil spring, remove the bolt carrier group, and your gas tube comes off the same way as on the original Galil. Your standard 2-lug rotating bolt is right here, and you can clean that just like you would before. To go back into a same thing, return your bolt. Return your gas tube, same exact kind of system with splines and all, really exactly identical to the original Galil. Then line up your gas piston with the gas tube, push down onto the lower receiver, seat it forward. Same trick with the spring. Install it, but install it underneath the actual recess so that it's not quite in there. You'll see that there's a rubber gasket, little buffer here that they put on the ACE. Now, there is a spline on the front of this Picatinny rail, which they've done something to improve a little bit on the Galil ACE to make sure this retains zero even better than the original Galil, which makes it even tighter to fit. Now, I've heard you can karate chop this into place. I haven't found that to be the case, so I use a rubber mallet. Boom, that goes easy. Once that's in place, run the charging handle, and the recoil spring will go into that recess, locking this back in place. And that's all there is to it. So there are some other huge improvements to the Galil ACE from the original Galil, the most prominent one being Picatinny rail across the entire top of the gun, both the actual gas tube and the dust cover. I have found that both the dust cover on the Galil ACE with its iron sights, or Galil with its iron sights, and the Galil ACE with its Picatinny rail and its iron sights actually do retain zero, at least sufficiently for any kind of practicality in the field. So this tight dust cover does work and fixes that problem, even with an optic on the Galil ACE. Now, the original Galil did have a system where you could mount this really kind of Rube Goldberg thing into this rail and then tighten it down with a tension screw, mostly for night vision, and it gave a very high bore offset. It can be used for red dots as well, but it is really a hack, and it really looks like it's just begging to be damaged, and I would not recommend that. Of course, no such problem exists with the Galil ACE. Another huge thing, of course, is that these hand guards actually do cover up and protect some really cleverly designed pick rails. Now, there are rails on the left and the right, as well as underneath, and of course for all of your cool force multiplication equipment. And the handguard is mostly free-floated. It's not exactly free-floated, but it's close enough that it doesn't really divert or cause any zero issues. But if you take like this QD arms QD mount Harris bipod and put it onto this gun, you do kind of run into one problem, in that this bipod does take up a lot of rail space. I do get that, but the rail's so short that it leaves you almost no room for your hand anymore. You can use it, it's not saying it's impossible, but you're really giving up a lot just to mount that bipod. Now, you could get a smaller bipod, I get that, but this is kind of one of the standards. And Harris overall takes about the same amount of length, whether it's QD or not. There are third-party manufacturers of rails that are longer that I hear fix that problem. But out of the box, this is usable, but it's a little bit difficult. So that's just something to consider. All that said, I have to say that this is absolutely the direct lineage of the original Galil, a military rifle that has served well in military forces, including the Israeli one, and as well as the RK, the Finnish RK, very much the same gun. So this being that, even though it is a civilian targeted product, not necessarily a militarily targeted product, I'm going to say that this is a great rifle. I really like it. I like using it. The recoil is quite minimal, even in .308. You get 25 rounds of capacity with Magpul mags. The ergonomics are excellent. The reliability is excellent. That one failure to extract that I had in the match was ammunition, not the gun. I'm quite certain of that. And in every way, this is a .308 that pretty much kept up with guns on the field chambered in 5.56 on the field of competition. So in that regard, if you're in the market for a .308, I would highly recommend the Galil ACE. I assume the 5.56 as well, but I have no experience with that. My only experience is with this .308. This .308 was kindly loaned to us by Turtle Lake Tactical out of North Dakota, and I'd like to thank them for that. It was new out of the box when we dumped it in the mud, ran it through the two-gun match, and did other horrible things to it. Unfortunately, we do have to now ship it back to them. I would like to keep this gun because I like it, but it's their gun, and hopefully they enjoy using it after seeing it in these videos. But that said, this channel is completely Patreon supported. Every round of .308 that came out of this, which was a large volume, and all the time and expense to actually make these videos came from people like you who support this channel directly. We have no masters, no overlords, no sponsors, no advertising, completely viewer supported, and allows us to give you reviews like this where we tell you the honest results of what happens with the product, whether it fails or not. And we don't want overlords because we want to be able to do that, and it's you, the viewer, that make InRange capable of doing that. So thank you so much. If you aren't one, please consider supporting us if you can. You can find us at patreon.com/InRangeTV. And if you can't, we do understand, but you can find us at multiple distribution points. We're not just on YouTube. You can find them all at InRange.tv/watch. Thank you for watching, and share with your friends.